If there's a ranking system for truly insane movies, this one is about to shatter your perception of reality. At first, you might think it's just another crime action flick. Watch it again, and you'll realize it's a deep dive into human nature through the lens of crime. And when it all culminates in a brutal, jaw-dropping massacre, you won't be able to look away. The protagonist, Gino, is a private detective. One day, his company takes on a job spying on a powerful business tycoon, exposing his scandals and money laundering schemes. After days of staking out, the team finally got their chance. Gino was sent to stealthily follow the target, while his boss, Insu, moved in for a frontal ambush. At first, everything seems to go according to plan, but just as Insu rounded a corner, he suddenly got into a car accident, ironically, with the very tycoon they were investigating. The scene instantly turns awkward, and it's clear the other party won't let this slide. Meanwhile, Gino is tailing another car that belongs to the tycoon. He doesn't know why it's speeding like crazy, but his gut tells him something's up, so he keeps chasing. Then, out of nowhere, the car recklessly running red lights gets T-boned by a massive truck. Gino watches the wreck unfold in front of him, feeling like the world is collapsing. Elsewhere, our female lead, Nami, is getting ready for a budget sunbath in an abandoned apartment's bathtub. Just then, the walkie-talkie crackled to life. It's Gino, instructing her to tow the wrecked car to a repair shop. Nami quickly gathers her things and drives her tow truck to the crash site. Upon arriving at the scene, she intended to inspect the wrecked car's interior, but what she saw left her stunned. Inside, several boxes are packed to the brim with cash. Afraid of being seen, she quickly slammed the box shut and towed the car away. What she doesn't know is that Gino has been watching her every move. In fact, Gino saw the money before she did. He just couldn't make a move in broad daylight. So, as Nami tows the car to the repair shop, Gino rides up next to her window on his motorcycle. Flashing a devilish grin, Nami quickly towed the car to the repair shop, handed it over to the mechanic, Yakubu, and left. Meanwhile, Gino stood on the rooftop, waiting for the perfect moment to snatch the money. As Nami drove away, unease crept over her. It was obvious both she and Gino had their own agendas. Sure enough, she hadn't gone far before she abruptly turned the wheel, parking in a blind spot. Then, she slipped out of the car, scaled the wall, and sneaked back into the repair shop. Gino followed right behind. What none of them knew was that Yakubu had a habit of scavenging abandoned cars for valuables. Late that night, Yakubu searched the wrecked car for any valuable items. When he opened the trunk and found several massive boxes stuffed with cash, he couldn't contain his excitement. It was like winning the lottery. But just as he was celebrating, Nami, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped out. Seeing no point in hiding, she laid her cards on the table and proposed splitting the money. Yakubu was stunned at first, but after a moment, he figured it made sense. The two quickly reached an agreement and started dividing up the cash. Just as they were deep into their haul, Gino appeared behind them. Nami and Yakubu hadn't expected a third player in the game, but rather than stirring up trouble, they decided to keep things civil. In the face of such a massive fortune, none of them trusted each other, but they came to a silent understanding this money could never be made public. Following the underworld's finder's fee rule, they split the cash into 4 shares, one for Yakubu and his wife, Young-suk, and one for Gino and Nami. What they didn't know was that, at the same time, Gino's boss, Insu, and his assistant were in deep trouble. The tycoon had already figured out they had been spying on him, and he wasn't about to let them off the hook. On top of that, since their surveillance had indirectly caused the car accident, Insu and his assistant were now being held responsible for the damages. After the tycoon's butler tracked down the wrecked car, he led his men along with Insu and his assistant to the repair shop to retrieve the money. But when they arrived and opened the car, they found it completely empty. Needing to give an explanation, Insu's assistant immediately started searching the area. He noticed signs that someone had been here recently, but whoever it was had already escaped. The butler didn't even acknowledge the assistant's report. Instead, he turned to Insu and said coldly, "I don't care how you do it, find that money, or you're both dead." With no other choice, Insu nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, Nami and Gino were speeding away from the repair shop, their car packed with cash. Drunk on their sudden wealth, they cheered and laughed uncontrollably. Nami even kicked off her shoes, and Gino, completely lost in the moment, picked one up and took a deep sniff. As the saying goes, when basic needs are met, lust takes over, and with a fortune at their fingertips, they were no exception. Without hesitation, they drove straight from the road to a mattress, indulging in their primal desires. The next day, Insu's employer confronted him, Disappointed in his incompetence, she made it clear he was on his own now. She would handle the fallout, but he had better clean up his mess. With no other choice, Insu had to rely on his tracking skills to help the butler find the thief. Soon, they reviewed the surveillance footage. After hours of analysis, they concluded that Nami wasn't a suspect. She had left immediately after dropping off the car. That meant the real culprit was Yakubu, since surveillance and investigation were their expertise. It didn't take them long to dig up Yakubu's biggest weakness. He was an undocumented immigrant with no legal identity. At the same time, the undercover Gino overheard their plan to put Yakubu on the no-fly list. Wasting no time, he stepped aside and quickly texted Nami, warning her to tell Yakubu not to board a flight. Meanwhile, Yakubu and his wife were preparing to flee South Korea when Nami burst in with the news Yakubu was now a wanted man. Realizing the risk, Yakubu knew he couldn't take any chances. Instead, he told his wife, Young-suk, to take their child and leave first while he stayed behind to secure a fake passport. At the same time, Insu arrived at the butler's boss, Chairman's office. Desperate, he offered to hand over all the classified intel he had secretly gathered if Chairman would let him work under him. Insu knew an opportunity when he saw one, and he promised to recover the missing money, but to his shock, Chairman simply laughed. He didn't care about the money at all. At that moment, Insu realized he had completely miscalculated, but at least Chairman wasn't upset. Seeing that Insu was smart enough to switch allegiances, Chairman decided to accept him. Soon after, Insu and his men headed to the riverbank, burning every piece of blackmail material they had on Chairman, erasing all evidence that could be used against him. Although Chairman claimed the money wasn't important, the butler didn't believe him. The butler said, "It may not be a fortune, but it's still a huge sum. I will get that money back." Meanwhile, Yakubu made his way to the underground black market, a haven for undocumented immigrants like himself. There, he sought out the crime boss, Akun, to get a fake passport. Akun forged the passport, but just as Yakubu was about to hand over the money and leave, Akun stopped him. Akun knew Yakubu's situation inside and out. Seeing him suddenly come into so much cash, greed got the better of him. He decided to squeeze Yakubu for more. Yakubu, having spent his life struggling at the bottom, had long been beaten into submission. He didn't dare resist, but just then, Gino, who had been accompanying Yakubu, stepped forward, but Akun clearly had no intention of letting them leave so easily. One of his men immediately grabbed a Nepalese knife and stepped forward. Seeing the situation escalate, Yakubu and Gino knew there was no talking their way out. In a split second, Yakubu shoved Gino aside, slamming into the armed man and knocking him down. Seizing the moment, he grabbed the passport. With no time to think, the two snatched the document and bolted for the exit. But this was Akun's turf, and his men outnumbered them. Dodging attacks left and right, they fought their way through the crowd, barely making it to the door. At the last second, they slammed it shut, trapping Akun inside. Just as they thought they had finally escaped, they looked up only to see the entire alley swarming with Akun's men. Realizing they were cornered, Gino activated his special ability. He started flinging wads of cash into the air. The crowd, made up of people struggling at the bottom of society, instantly turned into a frenzy. The sight of money raining down was too much to resist. Seizing the opportunity, Gino made a run for it, while Nami pulled up in a car, waiting downstairs. They waited anxiously for Yakubu, but he was nowhere to be seen. Finally, they spotted him, but he had been forced to the edge of a window, trapped by Akun's men. With no other choice, Yakubu took a deep breath and leaped off a ledge, landing hard on the car's roof. Before they could celebrate their escape, flashing red and blue lights appeared ahead. A police car blocked their path. In an instant, they were all taken into custody. Because Yakubu was from a poor country, the authorities decided to hold him in detention for the time being. Furious, Nami cussed out the police, but they couldn't care less. Left with no options, she had no choice but to leave. Seething with frustration, though they couldn't rescue Yakubu, Gino and Nami weren't about to let that ruin their fun. They went straight to the most luxurious hotel in town, booked a presidential suite, and indulged in an over-the-top, hedonistic celebration. It was the ultimate rags to riches fantasy, played out in the most extravagant way, so much so that anyone watching would be tempted to experience it for themselves. The next day, Insu tracked down Yakubu. After bribing the police, he began his interrogation. His assistant took the lead, switching between ruthless beatings and near strangulation, demanding to know where Yakubu had hidden the stolen money. Gino could only watch helplessly as Yakubu was tortured. He tried to get the police to intervene, but corruption ran deep. They weren't about to risk offending a powerful tycoon just to protect a poor immigrant. Eventually, Yakubu cracked. He revealed that the money was buried 10 meters deep in a pit. Insu and his men spent hours digging, only to uncover a single box far less than the total stolen amount. Frustrated, Insu stepped forward, warning Yakubu to hand over the rest of the money. He even sneered, "Someone like you? No one would care if you just disappeared into the dirt." This time, Yakubu had had enough. He lunged at Insu, ready to fight back, but Insu shoved him straight into the pit. Enraged, Yakubu cursed Insu's entire family tree. As tensions escalated, the assistant who was operating the excavator accidentally swung the machine's arm, smashing Yakubu in the head. Blood sprayed everywhere as he collapsed. Unconscious, half his skull cracked open. For a moment, the entire group froze. They had talked a big game about getting rid of Yakubu, but actually killing him? That was a whole different level of trouble. Panicked, they rushed Yakubu to the hospital. Insu wasn't stupid. If money was missing, someone else had taken it, and he had a good idea who. He sent his assistant after Nami. Gino, realizing things were spiraling out of control, immediately texted Nami, "Don't go home." But there was no way Nami was letting go of her newfound fortune. Ignoring the warning, she returned home. What she didn't know was that Insu's assistant was already there, lying in wait. And as expected, Nami, completely unaware of the trap, retrieved her stash of money from the rooftop, preparing to flee. The moment she exposed the cash, the assistant moved in for the ambush, but Nami caught sight of him in the mirror just in time. Reacting instinctively, she launched a preemptive attack. Unfortunately, she was no match for the assistant's brute strength. For 2.5 minutes, she endured a relentless, one-sided beating, but money has a way of fueling desperation. With sheer determination, Nami found an opening. She landed a brutal kick straight to the assistant's groin. As he crumpled in pain, she didn't hesitate. Another kick. By the time she was done, he wasn't getting up anytime soon. Grabbing her suitcase full of cash, she ran. Even after escaping, Nami couldn't stop thinking about Yakubu. Disguising herself, she made her way to the hospital. Luckily, Yakubu was alive. Gino and the others were there too. Gino knew their time was running out. As a last resort, he handed Nami a copy of Chairman's secret files, something he had stolen earlier. It was their final bargaining chip, but they needed more than just leverage. They needed firepower. So, they headed to the underground black market. They stocked up on guns, weapons, anything money could buy, spending even faster than before. Because they knew one thing: if they didn't enjoy their wealth now, they might not live long enough to enjoy it at all. And with that, they bought a luxury sports car and took it for a wild ride, fully embracing the high life, no matter the consequences. But Gino had no idea that Insu was already suspicious of him. Once Yakubu's condition stabilized, Insu set a trap. He tricked Yakubu into believing that Nami and Gino had betrayed him, slowly chipping away at his last shred of trust.
Oh, Nami, Gino, Yakubu, best friend. Best friend!
Sure enough, Insu had guessed correctly. Immediately, he sent his men to search Gino's house, unaware that he had already been exposed. Gino pulled up in his car to pick up Insu and his assistant. The two men got in, acting as if nothing was wrong, but once the car was moving, they dropped the act, leading Gino into a series of subtle but sharp questions, pressuring him to confess. That's when Gino realized he was busted, but he wasn't about to go down without a fight. Insu smirked, mockingly placing a helmet on Gino's head like he was sealing his fate. But before he could gloat further, Gino slammed the brakes, sending both men lurching forward. Taking advantage of the chaos, he wrapped the seatbelt around the assistant, restraining him, and bolted from the car. Just as he thought he had a chance to escape, the cops showed up. Without hesitation, they pepper sprayed him in the face before he could even react. In the end, Gino was tied up. With Gino captured, Yakubu was now useless to Insu. So, they dumped him at the airport like discarded trash, leaving him to fend for himself. Gino knew he was in deep trouble. Before the beating began, he secretly dialed Nami's number. Nami answered the call, but Gino said nothing. Then, the sound of him being beaten came through the line. From the conversation, she also learned that Yakubu had been dumped at the airport. Nami immediately contacted Yakubu's wife, Young-suk, telling her to go to the airport and pick him up. By the time Young-suk heard the news, she was already seething with rage. Meanwhile, Gino was enduring the worst moment of his life. Frustrated that they couldn't find the stolen money, Insu and his men tortured him mercilessly to tighten the noose. Insu's men recorded the beating, using it as leverage to force Nami into handing over the remaining cash. But what they didn't know was that Nami had already teamed up with Yoon-suk to plan Gino's rescue. Their secret weapon? The dirt Gino had stolen on Chairman. When Insu received Nami's message, his world collapsed. Hadn't they destroyed all copies of that blackmail material? How the hell was there still one left? Panicking, he rushed to the meeting point Nami had given him. Nami, meanwhile, was fully prepared. She tested her gun one last time, then secured it to her thigh, ignoring the drooling creep watching her as she headed to the meeting location. At the scene, Nami remained completely unfazed even when she saw the puppet master behind it all, Chairman himself. But what truly shook her was the sight of Gino. Bruised, bloodied, barely clinging to life, he looked like he had been to hell and back. Tears welled in Nami's eyes, but she stood her ground. Let us go, or I make sure the whole world knows your dirty secrets. The butler, realizing he had completely botched things in front of Chairman, had no choice but to agree to Nami's demand. His only condition was to meet them privately later to negotiate for the files. To show his sincerity, he even declared that the money was theirs to keep, including Yakubu's share. However, Nami and Gino flat out refused. The henchmen standing around couldn't hold back their laughter. After Gino and Nami left, Chairman exploded in fury, cursing Insu's entire bloodline, from his ancestors to his unborn grandchildren. The butler wasn't spared either. I pay you 20 billion won a year, and this is what I get. This is worse than eating actual SHT. The onlookers struggled to contain their laughter at the scene. Meanwhile, Gino and his crew weren't about to let this go. They had all suffered in different ways, and they were determined to settle the score. After much discussion, they came to one conclusion: wipe out everyone involved. But they knew they couldn't do it alone. So, they went straight to Akun, the black market kingpin, and offered him a fortune to take care of Insu and his man. The next day, Insu and his team arrived at the meeting spot, completely oblivious. They even returned Yakubu's stolen money, thinking they were about to safely retrieve the files. Insu, putting on a fake smile, handed Yoon-suk a stack of cash, pretending to be remorseful, but Yoon-suk and Nami weren't buying it. Without hesitation, Nami pulled out the Nepalese knife strapped to her back and in one swift motion, severed Insu's hand clean off. Before he could even scream, Yoon-suk finished the job, beheading him on the spot. The butler and his assistant panicked and tried to flee, but their car had already been doused in gasoline by Akun. Flames engulfed him, turning him into a real-life Ghost Rider. The assistant, seeing his comrades slaughtered one by one, fell to his knees and begged for mercy. I was just following orders. I'm just a low-level worker. Gino smirked, twirling his knife. He raised the blade and in one swift motion, slashed downward. A single lock of hair fluttered to the ground. After tying up loose ends, Gino went straight to Chairman. As it turned out, the two had been in on this together all along. Chairman had long been disappointed with Insu and the butler's incompetence, so he let Ji-woo handle the dirty work for him. Because at the end of the day, there's no room for the weak in the world of the powerful. As the saying goes, serving the king is like walking alongside a tiger. With the blood shed over, everything finally came to a close. Maybe one day, you'll stumble into a fortune, just like in the movies. See you next time.